So this video is it's one of them, you know, I know nobody watches these, but my passions, my videos. I enjoy making these things, and I know I've still got all the bits of ones to do, you know. I haven't finished the Doctor Who one yet and that. And as you can see from the title, it's Deep Space Nine. Why I jumped to that first, I just did. It's my favourite, so why not? Just a kind of brief thing about Deep Space Nine. Now obviously it was kind of a copy, and they do, in fairness, they do pay tribute to Babylon 5, which will be one that I obviously eventually do, because I think it's one of the greatest TV sci-fi things ever made, and it was the first one to use what's it called, the special effects thing, the computer CGI, that's it. And yeah, obviously Deep Space Nine and the Star Trek franchises have a lot more money than that, and it was basically unlike kind of random episodes, this one was followed on the story. It's obviously the way modern things are a lot now, isn't it, where they're serialized, they're kind of an arcing story, and obviously a lot of it took place on the station, so it gave that chance for lots of kind of development, character development, and different interactions and relationships. And this one, you know, it broke ground like Star Trek's famous for. I mean, you a lot of things you read about Star Trek, it's woke. I mean, I don't know why that's a bad thing, but yeah, that's kind of the point of Star Trek mush. It's kind of to be decent and show that the world can be a better place and all of that. So obviously it's the first one to kind of show a single father in him bringing up his son. He's black as well, so you know, it kind of crosses different kind of pathways with that. It looks at, there's a darker side. Sisko, oh wait, I'll go into this more, but Sisko is not your typical knight in shining armour captain who does everything by the book, you know, and right. There are complex characters with darker sides. It's much more of a kind of a whole brilliant story arc, and again maybe influenced quite a bit by Babylon 5. There are kind of similarities in the arcs of the story and that, and it's a brilliant one, and it's one I've watched again and again and again and again. Don't get me wrong, there are stupid stories in it, there are episodes which I think are terrible, there's some terrible pointless cringing singing and such like in it, and it's of its time in terms of, you know, popular culture kind of feel about it and that, but it was very good, and it's the best, and it has kind of set a benchmark. Well, not just, I mean, Star Trek, I'm sure other things were kind of influenced by this, and a sci-fi kind of arc where it continues on, and it's more about the characters and things like that than just zooming off here and there on random things. So yeah, I'll get into the video. It's a very long introduction. So we'll start with Sisko, who's the captain of the station. Now his kind of background is he's kind of pushed there and given the job as the best man for it by Picard, obviously of Next Generation fame, that legendary captain. Now actually Sisko doesn't like Picard. He has a very difficult relationship with him because his wife, it runs through a bit of the story, was killed on a ship that when Picard was Locutus, he'd been assimilated into the Borg Collective, was responsible for destroying that ship and many others, but obviously losing his wife to him, so he's not his biggest fan, let's put it that way, and he's also not keen to be at that station. Now Sisko kind of develops a lot as a character. He's fairly gruff and straightforward and strong at the beginning, but he kind of develops, he's a soldier as a leader, which isn't very kind of common running through the captains. And obviously I'll probably get through the whole thing as the story develops. Obviously in the war with the Dominion, who are like from a different sector, they come through the wormhole. He does things that never mind Star Trek wise are quite dodgy. He kind of sort of elicits the killing of someone, fake evidence to bring other people into the war and stuff. He's he's a pragmatist, and not everything's black and white for him really. And he is a good guy, but he uses, you know, different methods to what we're used to seeing in Star Trek especially. He also, on the other side of that, he's like I say, he's a single father, and he's responsible for bringing up his son and protecting him from that. Then there's obviously a lot of relationship dynamics there, and difficult talks and things like that, and that's really good actually. Again, see that father-son relationship, and his obviously the affection and the love between them, which he is very good at showing. Again, not something you'd see a lot of in that time period. Also, again, he's another very special, important character throughout the story, because he's kind of half prophet. Now the prophets are what the Bajorans call them, which is the world that lives near the wormhole. I suppose I'm going to have to do more about what it's about and the people as I get to characters from different places. But anyway, the prophets are wormhole aliens, but his mother turns out to have been a wormhole alien, and he's kind of there to ensure what is, you know, always be meant to be kind of happens. And in the end, he doesn't die, no spoilers, but he does kind of go to the prophets. He makes sacrifices, he makes mistakes, and he ends up there anyway. So yeah, he has a kind of loyalty and a great sense of deep protection towards the Bajor, the planet, and they call him the emissary because he's like the go-between between the prophets and excuse me, and Bajor. So what have I picked for him? Such a complicated, I mean, he is really one of the best. He is so complicated, so many different layers, so many different kind of moral implications and personality traits. He's a brilliant character. Again, probably one of the first to have quite so much depth. So I've picked Amouage Silver Oud, opus, let's say 13. It's one of the opuses anyway. And yeah, this is a very, like, again, a very complex, multifaceted, rich, elegant, strong, bold fragrance. And it opens up quite, sometimes you get it, sometimes I don't, kind of dirty, earthy, cheesy, animalic oud. But ultimately it's all these levels of oud running through it, and it has this silver woody smell about it, like a silver aura all around it. So you can see, for so many reasons, you know, the elegance, the strength, the kind of position of great kind of, you know, royalty, if you want to put it like that, the silver aura of being kind of, mystical's the wrong word, but, you know, kind of otherworldly and all of that. It is just an exceptionally brilliant fragrance. This is one I will own at some point. I think it's one of the best ouds that kind of available to the West that I could wear. It's one that sticks true to Amouage's roots. But yeah, it just fits. It just fits him so well. So yeah, Benjamin Sisko, Amouage Silver Oud. So next we have Major Kira, who is like his first officer, if you like, and she's kind of the Bajoran, because it's sort of a Bajoran station. Should I talk about this with? Well, right. Bajor is the planet it kind of operates right now. Bajor is a planet that was occupied by the Cardassians, and they were basically a slave kind of people under a kind of very ruthless, murderous regime from the Cardassians, who scarred the planet and scarred the people. And Kira was a freedom fighter who, you know, attacked back towards getting rid of the Cardassians and such like. Her mother, it turns out, was what you call, in inverted commas, a collaborator. Yeah, I mean, what that means is she was kind of a comfort woman for the Cardassians, and that was obviously to benefit and keep her family safe, which is quite hard for Kira to kind of deal with, but in the end she kind of understands she understands that, and she was a comfort woman to the most ruthless kind of evil one of them all, the kind of commander of the operation there, if you like, Ducat, who I will talk about later. Well, yeah, Kira doesn't always agree with the Federation. She doesn't have to. And there's a lot of clashes, and obviously she has a very strange relationship with Sisko in the fact she sees him as a prophet, if you like. The emissary, the connection between the two, and kind of she finds that really tricky because he's a captain, he's a Federation person, he's also, you know, a religious figure, and sometimes her things kind of develop in a way. Anyway, in the end, I'm not going to ramble on too much. Kira, actually, Cardassia ends up being occupied by the Dominion, by the shapeshifters, which I'll get into a bit later, and she helps them with, like, liberating their planet from them, and she sees the genocide and the awful things that is unleashed on them, and in a way she doesn't take any pleasure in that. She doesn't think it's what they deserve or whatever, and she works with two of them to kind of free their people and train them and such like, and that must take a lot. Also, she has a relationship and kind of falls in love with Odo, who is one of the founders, the Dominion, and they have a difficult relationship, and in the end he goes back. But yeah, again, she's not a, you know, a straightforward 2D character. She's got lots of different facets and levels, and obviously a woman of complete power who was, you know, into the freedom fighting and all of that. Again, it's very Star Trek to kind of show so many different sides to things, and she has quite a complex moral compass for obvious reasons as well. So what have I picked for Kira? I have picked the Electimus Vichy leather. Why have I picked that one? So yeah, why did I pick that one? Because it's one of the nicest leathers I've ever smelled, actually. It's this kind of it is leather and it's smoky. There's a little bit of a kind of animalic gruffness there, and it's also got this kind of, you know, the tender kind of floral notes of pink pepper, and it sparkles, and there's a lot of musks around it, and that it's really very elegant, and it's a leather. It's not your typical fruity leather. It's got more of a kind of smooth edged, even a bit of a balsamic touch about it. And I think that again represents Kira as being this, you know, she's a kind of spiritual person. She's a hard-ass person. She's done some very terrible things herself. She's kind of torn between revenge and doing the right thing. She's obviously very intelligent. She's a great leader. She's torn between a place in the Federation and being a Bajoran. So, you know, doing things not necessarily that she wants to do, you know, trying to maintain peace. She cares deeply about her planet and her people, and obviously she's felt and lived through the pain of it all. And I just think that kind of dark but sweet and smooth kind of really nice leather fragrance is perfect for her. So Vichy leather from Electimus for Kira. So next we've got Dr. Bashir, Dr. Julian Bashir. Obviously he's the Doctor, and like a great history of Star Trek, the Doctors really are kind of main parts, and I'm trying to think of an exception. They always pretty much are the heart of the show. They are the kind of more human, if you like. The more looking at the suffering and pain, and well, anyway, Bashir is no kind of exception to that rule. Now, to go into a bit of a kind of background of Bashir, he is actually an augment, which is what they call people who have been genetically enhanced, but nobody knows. But it is illegal to be that in Star Trek, because there was some sort of what's the word, genetics war. So yeah, obviously, you know, people shouldn't be altering the genes and whatnot of people. But he could serve anywhere, because, you know, He finished second in his class deliberately, so as not to give it away, his abilities, if you like. And he kind of plays down a lot of what he's good at. He's also someone, again, perhaps with a little bit of a darker side. He's very determined, and when he wants to get his own way, he will. He's approached by Section 28, which is like a covert Federation thing that kind of does things that the Federation can't be seen doing, you know, that sort of jazz. And he's a bit of a kind of romantic, failed romantic. He's interested in every single lady ever, practically, but doesn't always get very far. He's very smooth. I don't know if he's meant to be English in it or not. His daddy's was a terrible accent, but it's Alexander Siddig, who's obviously my favourite actor, and he's brilliant. So yeah, like I was saying, maybe he was meant to have that kind of charm about him, and you know, that English suaveness. He's very arrogant. He's not always the easiest to get on with. And he's best friends with Miles, who's kind of, that's the biggest romance and closeness, even though it's, you know, not physical in the thing. So yeah, the fragrance I've picked for him is La Prima from Milano Fragranzi, which is like, it's lots of peach, it's lots of Davana. It's this rich kind of almost boozy, beautiful, fruity one. It's a touch of the fir through it. And I've gone for that because it's kind of it's a posh one, isn't it, really? And obviously he's a doctor. He's very smart and arrogant. He's kind of from that background, you know, of being quite entitled and all of that. So yeah, I think they're kind of a great match. Now, as far as character development goes, obviously he does come out, well, it comes out what he is and that. He's stuck with a very kind of big dilemma, which is why Section 31's involved, because he was working on Odo, you know, I think Odo was sick or something. Anyway, what they'd done is they'd made him spread a disease through Odo to wipe out the Founders. Now, as we've been through before, the Founders were the evil kind of other side, but the fact he doesn't see the genocide of an entire people being quite the right way to do things, so it kind of goes against the Federation quite a bit, who think they should all die in the end. Anyway, that's Dr. Julian Bush. Next is Miles O'Brien, Chief O'Brien. Now, O'Brien started life on the Enterprise. He was in the Next Generation as a transporter chief, I think. But obviously he becomes more of a main kind of character in this. He's the chief engineer. He's one of the rare ones that actually has a family there. He's married to Keiko and he has a daughter with her. So there's a lot of good story developments of what having a family would be like, and even having children, and the kind of ups and downs of their relationship, and the work stress, and obviously the war going on and that. And O'Brien's kind of there. He's your everyman. Do you know what I mean? He represents a kind of just a general average person in that century. Although he's quite high up, he very much is kind of, you know, that kind of thing. And he like I said, he has a very deep, close relationship with Bashir, who they are complete opposites, but they get on really well. You know, they go do all these sports and games together. They build toy castles. You know, like a proper bromance. They do get on. And you know, that relationship is obviously as important as the relationship with his wife. It's an escape. It's going on. What does O'Brien do in his story arc? He's just kind of always there. He does become a bit of an undercover spy for a bit, because it suits him that he is kind of this everyman sort of person. Does he do anything else? You know, like a great history of engineers, he you know, he over exaggerates things. He saves things at the last minute. He does, you know, things out of the ordinary with technology and that. He's a very bright person. He has that same kind of personality as well. He wants to get his hands dirty and just get on with stuff and do it himself. A bit of a workaholic. Yeah, his relationships are also, you know, very turbulent up and down, again because it's work first and you know, everything else after. And what I picked for him is, because he's everyman, and it's not an insult to him or anything, but I suppose the everyman fragrance of our modern time is Dior Sauvage, isn't it? And the fact is, for somebody like O'Brien, he's not going to be fussed about stuff like this. He's going to get out the old sonic shower, which now I'm imagining metal shards and stuff. He's going to spray something shower jelly, like Sauvage. There's no thought, he just smells nice, he smells appealing, he smells friendly and approachable. He's not hoity-toity or posh or anything like that. He's not out to impress anyone, so it's the perfect fragrance for that. Anything to add about O'Brien? Well, a character that comes into it also after the Enterprise, he has, because of his everymanness and his kind of, you know, he'll take them for a drink and talk through them and etc. It's one of his great skills. He's a talker, and he's stereotypically Irish for that. But yeah, he's kind of the big brother of the station and that. So that's Chief O'Brien and Dior. Next, of one of the more main characters is Dax. This is Jadzia Dax, and I'll kind of get straight into her kind of backstory. She's a Trill. The Trills might have first appeared in the original series actually, but they were definitely in the Next Generation. They're basically a symbiont host and thing. Are they Trills, and the creature that lives inside them is something that I can't remember. Anyway, she's this organism that lives in her and herself. They're specially chosen. They have to go through lots of rigorous kind of tests and things and be chosen to be the right host. And Dax obviously has the creature itself is called Dax, and that has the memories of all the previous hosts and that, which obviously makes quite interesting stories for you know, different ways of pairing off their lives and such like. But also Sisko was friends with the previous host before Jadzia, Curzon, and he also knew a lot of other people, so Sisko kind of relates to her through that as well. But it's hard sometimes for him not to treat her as her own person and that. Now Jadzia is quite a strong-minded, kind of wild, hot-headed person. She helps the Klingons out because obviously Curzon used to, so she has relationships with Klingon families. She gets with Worf and marries Worf. Worf will be upcoming, so she likes the men strong and that. She's very dominant and independent and sexually sure of herself and that. Julian, the Dr. Bashir, he chases her for a bit, but yeah, he's definitely not her type. And also, I mean, you could call it's the symbiont, it's the thing in her that is fluid, but obviously she's fluid. And this is the thing, she's neither man nor woman, even though she's in the body of a woman. She's neither straight nor gay or whatever. There's, you know, it's that kind of a big step again for Star Trek to kind of have a character like that, where it's irrelevant. It's just the person that she is. That's all that matters. So in a way, quite a clever character. Again, as far as having a big kind of mark on the story, not particularly. She's there. She's involved in certain things. She gets killed by Dukat, who actually doesn't mean to kill her. When she finds out she's pregnant with Worf's baby. And then, Ezra Dax is the next one after her, but she's definitely unprepared in that. And because she's only in one season, you do start to develop. Everyone develops a relationship with her, and that it's very tricky for Worf because she's not Jadzia, but it's hard for him not to separate the two and that. And Ezra is she's not as, let's say, switched on and what have you. She's more nervous, she's not quite as confident, so she struggles with a few issues in that. I quite like Ezra, but obviously when it happened, I think it's because the actor who played Jadzia left, so she wasn't very liked, but she's all right. But anyway, yeah, that's Dax. A very kind of strong, independent-minded person. And what I've picked for her, what I picked for that is Alien from Mugler. And I think this suits her because it suits her personality, the whole kind of, you know, the big boldness, that big dark jasmine, all them musks. It's something that you've got to have confidence to wear, and it makes a statement, and that's very much Jadzia. But also the concept of it, she's very unique as a character, like I say, with having all them lifetimes behind her. Some of them are quite dark as we explore them. There's been murderers, there's been all sorts of dodgy people, religious people, mentally insane people, and all of this goes together to make her up. And that's what Alien is a bit like. It's all these different facets and different ideas that go in there to make this unbelievably unique, groundbreaking fragrance of the time. And I do think it really suits her. So for Dax is Mugler's Alien. Next is Weyoun, who's one of the Vorta, one of the aliens who works for the Dominion, for the shapeshifters, and he's quite unempathetic, he's quite brutal, but he's also at the same time like a wondrous child. Everything's new to him and that. Although the previous, they do go through a lot of Weyouns, but the previous clones experience and that is obviously put into the next clone unless they're defective or whatever. But he's always wondrous. He wants to try and experience everything, even though he can't. He doesn't have a sense of taste and stuff. And what it is about him is that's the way the founders programmed him. They've made these, they took these creatures that were kind to them once. They helped hide the shapeshifters from the solids, and they rewarded them by kind of evolving them a bit more, but also by making them some sort of slaves. And they see them as they see the founders as gods, which is obviously, you know, it's going to lead to trouble, isn't it? So they obey without question. They are completely like subservient and treated very badly by the founders, to be fair, as well. But they're also smug and arrogant and laxy-daisy, don't really care kind of thing. And Weyoun's the one we get to know the most. There are a few of the clones of different ones, but Weyoun's kind of the main go-between between everyone and that. But the time you see him at his most timid and most scared and most what have you is when he's round Odo, because again Odo might be on the other side, but he's still one of his gods, which is quite confusing for Weyoun. And to be so close to him as well is always a bit kind of, you know. What I picked for Weyoun, I mean this is just a brief one, but what I picked for Weyoun is Kiali's Elixir. This is kind of a dark, fruity one. It's got some dark fruits running through. Is it apple, plum? With the kind of darker woods, maybe leather in there, is there? And it's this beautiful, rich, kind of sweet, but easygoing one. And obviously with them, you know, coming from just eating fruit and such like, and being quite dark and mysterious. Again, the Vorta are not evil. Well, I mean, what is evil? But it's a typical Star Trek thing to think they are just obeying their gods. No matter what their gods are going to ask them, they're going to do, aren't they? No matter how badly treated or disrespectful they are to them, they're still going to do it. They're gods. So it's a really kind of clever thing. And is it Andrew Coombs or someone who plays him? He plays loads of different characters in Star Trek, but he does it just so well. He has that kind of childish wonder with the ruthless evil in there, and it's a great character actually. So that's Weyoun and Kiali's Elixir. So next is Worf. Now Worf is a Klingon, and he joined Starfleet in the Next Generation, but his parents were adopted him after an incident where the Romulans killed his entire family and destroyed the entire base. So his human parents adopted him and brought him up. It's just basically, just very briefly with that backstory, the Romulans were allowed to do this because they were in cahoots with some Klingons. Is it the Dumar family, who were trying to take over the Empire? They failed, and that was exposed in the end. But because to maintain things as they are in the Klingon Empire, Worf was still from a disgraced, traitorous family, and he did that. But Picard sorts all that out for him. Anyway, he comes into Deep Space Nine in second series maybe, or third, where he works for Sisko. He's kind of put in charge of the Defiant, which is the ship that they use mainly, and he falls in love with Dax, and gets with her, but obviously she dies. But the point is, he has a very kind of complex and rich story. Now Worf and the actor have appeared in more Star Treks than anybody else, I believe, because obviously he's been in 3 series at least I can think of the main ones. And yeah, he's a character. Obviously he's Klingon, so he's full of honour and doing the right thing. He's not as corrupt as most Klingons, and he does ultimately what's best for the Empire. In the end, in Deep Space Nine, he kills Gowron, who's the Chancellor of the Empire, and a bit of a wrong one really. But he doesn't want to take power himself. He passes it on to Martok, who's a much more kind of honourable, decent, as far as Klingons go, kind of fella. So he's this kind of proud warrior, but he's also very in touch with his emotions and his strength and that. He also has a son with somebody, which was kind of a bit of an accident, but the mother died with that. He really does struggle to bring him up. He's not very good at it, and the kid gets adopted out, but does come back later on, and he's not as Klingon as Worf would like, etc. Eventually Worf comes round to this, that he's just doing his best with his unfortunate kind of the way he is and that, and he's quite proud of him. Worf is basically the warrior. He's the one who has no fear, who will always protect everybody and put everybody first and that. There is a lot more, because again, like I say, he's been in that many series, but just kind of focusing around that's ultimately who he is. So for Worf, I've picked Old Man Luxury's Zafar. Now I've picked this one because it's a very bold fragrance. It's a very big fragrance. It's very rounded. It's not shy. It's quite sophisticated. It's quite has a massive presence. But running through it, obviously it's quite an oody, leathery one. But running through it are some florals and a kind of softer touch to it, and the spices and the musk kind of, give it a touch of sensuality. It is quite a lot until you get to know it and get to understand it. I think it's a perfect one for a Klingon, and understanding the deep levels of complexity, and their culture is just as rich and beautiful. It's just different, and not all of them are the same, obviously, as well. And I think it matches with Worf a lot. I'm not going to ramble because it's getting too long. So for Worf is Old Man Luxury's Zafar. So next we have Quark, who's a Ferengi, and he owns the bar there. He's one of my favourites. He's probably one of the best characters as well. He's put there for comic relief mainly. Now the Ferengis, I mean, they always say they don't represent things directly, but the Ferengis are like these ruthless capitalists where everything is about profit, nothing else, nothing more. And they have the rules of acquisition, which are kind of like these strict rules that they must stick to. They're not meant to be nice, they're not meant to be useful and whatever. They steal technology and exploit and what have you. So they kind of mirror modern capitalism ultimately. and modern capitalists, you know, they'll extract anything from you. They don't, you know, workers' rights and rights of people are completely non-existent things and are a sign of weakness and whatnot. They don't, you know, they'll take your last penny. If you're dead on the floor, they'll rob your wallet. They're them kind of, you know, modern capitalist kind of things. And Quark is a bit, he's a typical Ferengi, but he does have a heart, and he is quite a complex character. He works there with his brother Rom, who shames him by ultimately in the end getting a position in the Federation, and his son also does the same, and yeah, so he's a bit embarrassed by that, and his brother's quite stupid and quite too nice, as is Quark. And Quark kind of has many scrapes with the law. He has that kind of, like I said before, there's that relationship with Odo where they're constantly playing cat and mouse. He's always trying to outsmart him and you know, manage to commit his crimes. Some of his crimes he doesn't mean to do, and he has a bit of a thing also for Dax, and the same as Bashir and stuff. And he gets on with everyone pretty much, and everyone helps him out when he kind of has some scrapes and stuff. And his mother, women are supposed to have no rights and wear no clothes and make no profit. Well, his mother makes a lot of profit and ends up getting with a Grand Nagus, who's kind of the leader of the Ferengi people, and that's quite awkward and embarrassing for him. But yeah, he loves his mum and his family really. But he's obviously not meant to be seen to. And what I've picked for him is Sirens and Sailors. Now this is, remember Claire Smith describes it as a naughty party, and it kind of is. And it is the sort of party Quark will go to, you know, complete debauchery and nonsense and lots of alcohol and things going on there. Interesting and exciting. It's like rose peachy kind of fruits, nice muskiness. There's a soft suede leather running through it. It's also something, I mean, he wears quite fancy clothes. It's something that he would probably wear to match his outfit as well. And just to kind of finish with Quark, he's not as bad or as selfish as he comes across. He also becomes a warrior. He gets married to a Klingon woman. It all kind of happens by mistake, but it does prove that he is a very tough, brave person when he wants to be to rescue his mum. And again, he's quite brave, and you know, he does the right thing there as well. So he's a more complex character than he may come across. And Sirens and Sailors is just a very fun, enjoyable, exciting fragrance. Try not to die here, as you can see. It's quite a drop there, isn't it? So yeah, for Quark, Sirens and Sailors from Juicebox Fragrance. So only two more. It's been hard cutting them down, to be honest, into the main characters. Now Ducat is he the main bad guy? He's the main bad guy in the Alpha Quadrant, but he's also kind of the most dangerous of bad guys, really, because he's kind of a bit on the mental side. He's I think, like I've explained a little bit, he was kind of the person put in charge of Bajor during the Cardassian occupation, and he's got this in his head that he's kind of a good guy. They were occupying him for the benefit of Bajor, to make it civilized, and that he was kind. He didn't kill everyone. He only killed the people who allegedly deserved it, and all of this. And he gets this kind of complex in his head, you know, like he's some Donald Trump. He thinks he's some sort of messiah, when in fact he's a complete monster. And he's torn in lots of directions. Now he takes Bajor and brides and stuff, who I do think he does genuinely care for, and he does have a sort of affinity with the people. There's like an abusive father basically. And there's certain episodes where you see him slip further and further into this delusion, this madness. And he wants to, in the end, he works out he wants to get revenge on Bajor and to destroy them and their culture and everything because they're ungrateful. So he researches the Par Wraiths, who are like the anti-wormhole aliens. They're like the bad ones, and they've been in a battle for all eternity. So he kind of conjures them up and basically uses them to try and exact his revenge. He has many complex relationship with some of the characters, like Sisko. He's determined Sisko respects him and likes him, but obviously Sisko thinks he's a bit of a joke, and this really gets to him more and more. He's the one who brought the Founders and let them occupy Cardassia, which in the end, obviously we know how that turns out and that. So he's a complex, deluded character who sometimes, to be fair, you have quite a bit of sympathy for. Well, I do anyway. I mean, no one's bad. He's gone so far, he's kind of slipped off the edge, hasn't he? What I've picked for him is Otto Parese's Teroni. Now this has a similar profile to Black Afghano, which is their famous one. It's kind of this dense, dark, patchouli and kind of dark ambery, burnt woods kind of thing. But Teroni has some kind of orange fruitiness to it, and it smells like a burning volcano. You can smell and feel the red and the smoke. So much, it's a very big fragrance, but it is ultimately like I say, a volcano, burning embers, fire. And obviously that represents Ducat perfectly. I think he's a bubbling, simmering mountain of hate and insanity and vileness. And yeah, I imagine Ducat was quite fun to write, because obviously these dictators and evil people don't really think of themselves in that way. They think somehow they're doing a favour, and obviously they have lots of lick splittles and what have you. I mean, look at the Tory government and Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. It's all that kind of, yeah, you're great, sir, you're great, even though you're doing all these evil things. And so they get more and more deluded and more insane, don't they? And that is ultimately Ducat. I could talk for about 20 minutes about him, because he's so interesting. There's so many different facets and parts of him, and there's reasons behind him and little complexities and weaknesses, like his daughter, who he does ultimately love again. But yeah, it's complicated. So for Ducat is Otto Parese's Teroni. Now finally he's possibly again one of my favourites, if not my favourite, and he's so complicated again, and that's Garrick, who is another Cardassian. Now he was in the Obsidian Order, which is like Stasi police, like master spies and torturers and all of this. And you find out in his, like as you go through it, his dad was the main guy, the top of the guy there, but never kind of acknowledged him as his son. He abused him, he locked him in cupboards, he was brutal and nasty to him, and he was brutalised. Anyway, Garrick is kind of forced off Cardassia, and now everyone thinks he becomes a tailor on Deep Space Nine, and everyone thinks he's still a spy and that. And he plays off that, maybe to make himself important. He does have connections back on Cardassia, but again, ultimately, Garrick is not filled with the hate and the anger and the what have you of Bajorans and that. He's not involved with that side of it, but all he wants is what's best for Cardassia. He has a deep love of his land. His mother's still there. He loves his dad, even though his dad is not the greatest man ever, really. And he bonds with a few characters on the station. Not many trust him, but obviously Bashir's kind of intrigued by him, and they have a kind of complicated friendship. And in the end, when I say about Kira helped free Cardassia, he goes to be a part of that. Now again, he's not someone you'd think was overly brave. He's also agoraphobic because of the way he was treated as a child, and he has to do all sorts of things, and he does. And even Worf acknowledges the bravery it takes to just be in that enclosed space and manage to do it. And he goes and fights, and he helps Damar, who becomes the kind of figurehead for the uprising and that. Dukat survives, and he's not filled with hate or bitterness against the founders, because obviously what they were massacring Cardassians by the million. They were flattening cities as revenge and to keep power. But Dukat doesn't carry that bitterness. He just kind of cracks on and gets on with things. He hides behind his pain with humour and kind of sarcastic remarks and that, but you can see he's not a fan of being alone or everyone being suspicious and not trusting him. Although he does play off it, he doesn't want to be alone, and then he gets interested in someone who happens to be the aforementioned Dukat's daughter, and Dukat hates him with a passion. So that causes a bit of kind of friction there, and he gets warned off from Kira as well and stuff. So all he wants is his people and to be with his people, but he never really gets that chance, and it's quite sad really. And you can see, because of his levels, because of his deep complexities, his deep emotions, and he does do things that are, you know, morally perhaps not the greatest, but he does them because that's the way he is, and he does them for the greater good, I suppose. You could kind of look at it, but he does take a kind of certain amount of pleasure in it, which is, yeah, a bit disturbing. So what have I picked for him? I've picked Papillon's Anubis. It was a tricky one to pick this, but because he's kind of got this mystery, this kind of, what's the word, you know, enigma, and he's kind of, nobody really knows what to ever think of him. I think even he kind of loses what's fiction and what's bravado and what's not him. And obviously it's this smoky, dark, leathery, incensey fragrance. You know, it's quite not otherworldly, but quite mysterious, and makes you think of all these scenarios and situations in your head and stuff. And it's quite a fantastic fragrance, to be fair. And all these dark, dusty passageways and things like that, which is probably what his mind is a bit like. You know, all these dark tunnels and routes and hidden rooms and you know, treasures hidden and all sorts of things. And I think it kind of represents him very well. So I'm not going to waffle. That's Garrick, and that's Papillon's Anubis. So that's the end. Probably much longer than it should have been or could have been. There could be even more characters. There is a certain wealth of characters in this. Not all of them the main characters, but there are repeating people who come through it. Kai Wynn, I can't remember his name, the guy who kind of betrays Sisko, who gets a vendetta. There's obviously the female founder. There's a lot more of the founders. There's a lot more of the Vorta that are interesting. There's Quark's family, all the Ferengis are quite interesting. There's Jake Sisko, who I didn't put in there, and there's an entire wealth of a whole massive stories and characters. And the reason why I loved this one, and I think it will always be the best Deep Space Nine, is because this is what it is. It's all the stories of these different characters, them all coming together. Everything kind of leads to the end. There are a few, not like I say, a few nonsense episodes and stuff, but there are things that happen all the way through that kind of lay the seeds of what's coming and what's going to happen and stuff. And it's really good. Rather than, don't get me wrong, I love Star Trek and stuff, but rather than they just pop in here and there and a completely fresh story each time, you're given time to know, to understand the characters, to understand the story, and follow it like that, like a soap in space, isn't it? Like I say, Babylon 5, wow. And I'm so glad it inspired something like this, because both of them are brilliant. Both of them actually, there's a lot of similarities, but you know, Deep Space Nine's the famous one and that. So yeah, what about you? how would you scent them? Are you a big Deep Space Nine fan? Do you prefer some of the other series? Who's your favourite character? Alright folks, thanks, bye.